And here to help moderate in the room, who's the Vice President, I will turn it over to Wulf to get started. Damien will join us.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, Damien, for being available. And I apologize that I can't be there in person. I just got back from Europe, so this should work for now. May I ask how many people are in the room?
I would say estimating about 50 or so. Okay.
Should we go around and figure out what people know so I can tailor it a little bit?
Sure, and I will add that 50 very handsome attendees that you're not able to see.
I'm glad to know that they're attractive.
It's true. So how many people are familiar with blockchain? About almost everybody, about 80%. How many have used blockchain in their work, either with clients or yourselves? Nobody. What other questions should we ask?
How many of you have invested in ICOs or hold Bitcoin or other currencies?
Looks like we have about 2 or 3 hands.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a typical lawyer crowd interested in this, which is great. So
I would ask you, only 3 people have cryptocurrencies, but how many have had people bug you that you should buy cryptocurrencies, right? Almost there, yeah, lots of people.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. So what I want to do is I want to do something that may be somewhat redundant. Hold on, let me see. There we go. So I want to talk a little bit first about what the technology does, where it's coming from, what people expect from it, and then I want to, from there, transition into smart contracting. How many folks in the room know what smart contracts are?
Looks like we have about 7 or 8.
Oh, that's good. Okay, because that's the core innovation in law, and that's what when I teach coding for lawyers, that's what we go into. Yeah, so this idea of using code to replace our usual contracting features that we are all used to as lawyers. And of course, there are huge implications to, if we do that, huge implications for law. And so that leads into the third item then, which is the question as to whether our existing legal infrastructure, the way that we've all been taught, the way we are practicing, the way we think of the law in a centralized setup, if that can actually successfully, long-term successfully interact with crypto contracts, or with a crypto evolution period. So, because on smart contracting, I'm going to say this up front, we can build a whole new society on this. It sounds very idealistic, but so when I was in Davos just now with some of the world leaders in tech, that was all we talked about. What are we building on this new technology, and how is that changing society? Yeah. So we as lawyers, we are a crucial part of that, because we are tasked with finding new legal solutions for these tech clients and our regular clients that we used to represent before, including financial institutions, because they all have to interact with that new economy and that new crypto evolution. Yeah. So if we accept that notion, and just to be clear, at Davos, every day we had several high-level blockchain events. Yeah. So this is not something that is for startups only. This is mainstream American tech. Yeah. And it can affect all businesses in some form or fashion. Yeah. And so the third point really is about, if that's true, if crypto is evolving, what do we have to do as lawyers to stay relevant in crypto? And we have, in my estimation, I want to say this just up front, we have huge opportunities for new legal work. But we need to embrace that and need to pivot quickly to be able to capitalize on those new opportunities. And there will be some folks that pivot later than others. And those who are getting ready for it, including my students in coding for lawyers, to me, they have a real future in crypto. Yeah. Okay, and then lastly, what I want to talk about is our corporate governance system. So the way we've been trained to think about this, how is corporate governance changing, and what can we do with blockchain technology to improve our corporate governance systems and our corporate governance thinking. Yeah, so this is, and I will stretch many of you in the room by that point pretty far, I think. But there is really no way around these new corporate governance solutions. Yeah. Are there any questions up so far?
I think two logistical points, Wulf. Number one is we are able to only see your torso. It looks like your head is cut off, so I don't know if you can angle the camera up a little bit.
Oh.
Then you'll be able to truly be a talking head on our screen.
Is this better?
That is much better, yes. That's number one. And number two, and we talked about perhaps inviting questions during the presentation. You don't have to necessarily wait till the end. Please feel free to raise your hand. I will call on you, and then I'll transfer to the extent that Wulf will not be able to hear you. I will be your voice to repeat the question.
Great. Okay, if this works well for everybody, then it works for me. Okay, so any questions so far?
Looks like none so far.
Okay. So let's start with this. Most of us in the room know about Bitcoin, have an idea of what Bitcoin does. We all have sort of have had exposure to CNBC, all the major news outlets, who are literally trying to talk Bitcoin down. Literally, they want Bitcoin to be destroyed. They want it to disappear. Yeah, there's a lot of fear mongering right now. Contrast that with what's happening in Europe. In London, for instance, you have signs, public signs, open advertisements that say buy Bitcoin today. Yeah. So in America, we're still in many ways behind the curve. Yeah. So, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second. So we all know Bitcoin. So, but Bitcoin really is just, as I illustrate here, the tip of the iceberg, if you want. Yeah. So this is. People have started investing in it, and it's actually really good that we have Bitcoin because it creates awareness. Yeah, it creates a little bit of hype and is overhype, and there's some fear mongering, but at the same time, all of this is great because it creates awareness. And so, awareness for what? Well, awareness for the future of this technology and how it impacts society. Yeah. So, how can it impact society? Well, look at below the iceberg, below the waterline, that is. So we have governance, new solutions. And by the way, that's in Davos, World Economic Forum. That's what people's talked about. Yeah, that's how are we building new governance system? And some believe new governments based on that. Yeah. So this whole idea of decentralized governance, decentralizing society, that's what people are really talking about now. Yeah, and we as lawyers, we need to be part of that inevitably. Yeah. So then the next item is governance goes hand in hand in many ways with voting. Yeah. So some people are now saying, well, there's, for instance, eVote. There are a bunch of other systems out that are trying to figure out new blockchain-based solutions for voting mechanisms. And we can, I hope everybody in the room can agree that we have some problems in the way we are voting in the United States. Yeah, there's some inequities involved that we haven't yet been able to overcome. So these startups, they're trying to use blockchain technology to fix a lot of this. Smart property is the next idea. Smart contracts, we mentioned it. Name registrations, IoT, crowdfunding, and climate change. There are now a lot of sustainably driven crypto startups that want to fix these issues with blockchain technology. So it's literally, and I know it sounds cliche, we're in the Midwest, but I'm saying something that's very much West Coast now, but it's really this idea of improving humanity and saving problems that we couldn't solve before. Yeah? I think there's real critical mass now on blockchain startups that try to accomplish that. So, but long story short, Bitcoin is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more we can do with it. So let me move into this very basic definition of blockchain. So we're talking about the software protocol that runs Bitcoin and based on this underlying blockchain software. It's a decentralized system. It's some people compare it to a giant Google Doc spreadsheet. Yeah, and the implications, of course, are that we have a secure network where any transactions can be implemented, confirmed, and confirmed as unique and valid without intermediaries. So this whole idea of disintermediation. Yeah. Now, Vitalik, who in the room knows who Vitalik Buterin is?
Anyone? Nobody.
Okay, so he's the founder of Ethereum, the first blockchain-based smart contracting network that in so many ways kicked off this new evolution of technology implementation in society. So he looked at Bitcoin and started saying, well, we can do more with this technology. Now we can actually build smart contracting into this technology. And so Ethereum is the first iteration of that. Yeah, so the Ethereum blockchain. And now all crypto startups, they use it, well, not all, but almost all. I think it's 85 to 90, over 90% of ICOs in the United States are using the Ethereum blockchain. So he defined the blockchain as he actually used the word magic computer that anyone can upload programs to and leave programs to self-execute, where the current and all previous states of every program are always publicly visible, and which carries a very strong crypto-economically secured guarantee that programs running on the chain will continue to execute in exactly the way that the blockchain protocol specifies. So this is the idea of self-execution, complete transparency, and autonomous systems. And so that's one way to look at this. But going back to the earlier example, when we think of a global Google spreadsheet, we are looking to define the blockchain. We are looking at, and so you see in the middle here this new block. Yeah? So we have Alice pays Bob, Chris pays Doris, and so forth and so forth. So, and this is just an illustration of payment system. You can build smart contracts into this that have a lot more details and a lot more detailed information that goes into this. But you will see at the top of this block, there is what looks like a fingerprint. Yeah, and it comes from the previous block on the bottom left here. Yeah, so what does that fingerprint mean? It means that all the information by way of hash technology from the previous block is now fingerprinted onto the next block. Yeah, so the block in the middle that you all see is based entirely on the previous block. And so all the information from the previous block is now part of the next block. And so it's a constantly updating system through this technology. Yeah. So many of you in the room will now get very critical and say things like, well, this sounds like it's highly energy intensive, and you would be right. Yeah, it really depends on what consensus algorithm are you using to ensure that these blocks are added, and how are you using that consensus algorithm. So what I work on is try to find solutions through my startup and my academic work that sort of culminated in the startup. I'm trying to find solutions that overcome all the limitations that we're currently seeing. So the big two tickets, and this is what people, again, in Davos, that was the hot topic. What we need to fix is the non-scalability, the lack of scalability that exists because of the way this technology works right now. And second of all, we need to fix how the technology can evolve. Yeah. So the governance. Blockchain governance is one big ticket item. This technology cannot get over the next 10 years and evolve without a fully decentralized, evolutionary, dynamic governance system. Yeah, and that's what I'm working on right now. That's what this startup really is all about. And most importantly, before the governance comes, enterprise-facing solutions, meaning 300,000 transactions per second. That's what we need. What we currently have in Ethereum is not even close to that. It changes regularly. They're upgrading it. But we need to be able to be a Visa system, a new Facebook in blockchain. We need scalability. We don't have scalability. That's a huge problem in blockchain right now. Okay, so let me transition into what I'm trying to do when I'm talking. And so in this talk, when I start talking about blockchain technology, what I really want to get the audience to is to this point where the green and the yellow line intersect. Yeah. So how much I think I know versus how much I realize there is to know. That's where I want to get people typically. Yeah. That they start appreciating that this is something that they should learn more about. And that's all that's all I'm trying to do here in terms of getting and raising awareness. So, quick summary of the blockchain. So what we're talking about here is a shared ledger. However we want to define it, it could be a global Google spreadsheet that uses cryptography. So this goes back to this hashing idea, the idea of hashing, hash technology, fingerprinting one block onto the other. Yeah. To ensure secure, authenticated, and verifiable transactions. And then thirdly, we need a consensus protocol. that enables all of this. Also, all parties agree to network verified transactions, which is why and how we overcame the double spending problem. So this is really something that was absolutely fundamental to blockchain. So this idea of once you are creating a block and you're adding something to a block and something comes out of a wallet and is transferred to somebody else's wallet, how do we make sure that amount cannot be double spent? Meaning you can't use the same amount of cryptocurrencies and pay twice with it. And that's the core underlying necessity for the technology. So there has to be a consensus protocol that verifies that you already spent that money and you cannot double spend. Yeah, so that's the consensus protocol, and that's what Bitcoin really that's what Satoshi Nakamoto really facilitated. Yeah, he overcame the double spending problem that nobody had been able to fix before. The way he fixed it though is extremely energy intensive. Yeah, so that's how we get into the proof of work versus proof of stake debate, because we need to transition to proof of stake to overcome all the problems in the consensus algorithm of proof of work. Yeah? Okay, and then lastly, shared contracts. Yeah, so business and terms embedded in transactions in databases and executed with those transactions. So that's blockchain in a nutshell. So really shared ledger, cryptography, consensus algorithm, and shared contracting. So just to again, this is about raising awareness. Yeah. So for those folks in the room who know Bitcoin and who have an appreciation for this, let's move this to the next level and compare it to other achievements by humanity. You know, things that humanity has thrived through and was able to build society on. Yeah. So Industrial Revolution, first atomic devices, first flight, light bulb, personal computers, moon landing, and internet age. Yeah? So a lot of folks are saying that what this technology is literally moving us into the next phase, if you want. I prefer this comparison. Yeah? Defining technology eras. I prefer the comparison of blockchain or creating blockchain, using blockchain as an internet 2.0, and some say 3.0. And so it's the next generation of a decentralized, fully decentralized internet. So what have we done in 1994 with the internet? So for use this comparison. So we are self-publishing, personal communication, of course, and then hugely e-commerce. How we're using the internet has really not changed that much. But it facilitated and expanded and accelerated the way we're engaging in financial transactions, or in the way we are selling things, the way commerce works. Yeah? So it's a huge accomplishment, of course, of the internet years, and social interactions. Yeah? So a lot of folks in the room are probably fairly critical of what that has done to society, and I suffer from it every day. I get information and social interaction overload from the internet. It's a real problem. I admit that. So we're all tasked with managing that, and some of us, of course, do that better than others. And so that's really what happened during the internet years. Now that's transition in 2015. Some say it's earlier, 2013, 2014. But let's say 2015 was really the kickoff year. So we're now talking about blockchain as a decentralization of trust that unleashes value flow without intermediaries. Yeah, so this is how can you decentralize trust? And trust, remember, why for lawyers, right? Lawyers are needed to create trust in transactions, in enforcement, and so forth. Yeah. So for lawyers, this technology is a huge promise, but also a problem in many ways, because it forces us to think of new ways to add value to our clients, because there's this intermediation. Yeah? And lawyers are intermediaries. Let's be clear about this. We are. Yeah, we facilitate it and we add value, but we added value as intermediaries. The question is, how do we add value if the technology continues to facilitate trust relationships and disintermediates? Yeah? Okay, so a lot of people have, because of those core characteristics, really comparing blockchain technology or thinking of blockchain technology as encapsulating literally all the other tech innovations that we've seen. These 2016 trends, they're still pretty similar, but the way to think about this is that everything we're doing right now, AI, big data, Internet of Things, augmented reality, social impact of exponential technologies, and so forth and so forth, all these new analytics, digitalization, cloud-based solutions, platform solutions, they can all be integrated and be encapsulated with blockchain technology. Yeah? So, and by the way, that's where the surge is. To me, the surge is really in big data, AI, predictive analytics, and blockchain technology. I think that's what the next few years will show us. So let's talk a little bit about financing. So maybe we should poll the room and figure out what people are thinking. Let's try to compare the investments in blockchain technology to 1994, the early years of the internet age. Yeah? How many people in the room think that the blockchain investments, so investments in the technology, are exceeding the inflation-adjusted investments in internet technology in 1994? Hands, please.
We have 0 hands.
Wow, okay. So how many people think it's double what 1994 investments were in the internet age?
Again, 0 hands. Oh, 2 hands.
2 hands. Okay, let me tell you what it is. According to some estimates, we're now at 10 times with the investment that we were inflation adjusted in 1994 in the internet years. Yeah, so that is a huge signal towards the viability of this technology, despite all the problems. I want to be very clear again. We have huge problems in crypto. We're not enterprise facing, and we simply cannot process enough transactions. For anybody who's ever used the Ethereum blockchain, 2 weeks ago, I waited for 5 days for a transaction to clear. Yeah, it's just simply, it's not good enough. But we can fix it. Yeah, and people are working on systems to fix it. Okay, so let's look at what some of those blockchain startups are doing. So in the past, and I love this slide just because it illustrates where this technology is taking us. I want the audience, if we could, focus on the top left illustrations of past, present, and future. Yeah. So ignore all the names on it. I just really want to focus on illustrating what those mean. So past, present, and future. You can see in the past we were completely centralized. Everything we did necessitated, and we organized society through centralized systems. Our entire governance system, legal system, everything is based on centralized, completely centralized ideas. That's how we got society to where society is today. Yeah. So let me give you a basic example. A taxi company that, or we can also use publishing systems, yeah, or hotel chains. Everything was very centralized. But I think that the cab company is maybe most intuitive. So in the past, if I wanted transportation from one location to another, I had to call the cab company that owned cabs and paid their cab drivers. They would then call the cab driver and advise the cab driver where to pick me up and how to transport me to my location. Yeah, completely centralized way. Then now let's look at present. We now have technology that facilitates Uber. Uber is disintermediating through a platform system. Yeah, it uses this technology, and we all know how Uber works. In Uber, you use the technology to find somebody who's willing to drive you at XYZ amount of price with an XYZ rating, and the way Uber did it or provides the service is by charging a fee. Yeah, so we're still dealing with intermediation, except that we're dealing with intermediation in a platform system that allows to connect consumers and producers, in this case, drivers and drivees and or passengers. Yeah. So the problem with the present situation is what, though? Everybody thinks this is happy-go-lucky, everything is great, we're moving to the next. Everybody knows that how controversial Uber is, yeah? How many countries have banned it the French, the Germans. I mean, this is very controversial. Yeah. So the problem with this technology from a crypto purist perspective is the following. Uber is an intermediator that charges 25% for every single transportation service that is provided. They charge 25% that, from the perspective of the crypto idealist, the crypto purist, belongs to the passenger and the driver. Uber has no business under that doctrine or from that perspective to be charging peers who want to exchange services between the two of them. They have no business in this. Yeah. So that 25% really belongs to the driver and the passenger. And that's where the future lies. Yeah? That we find a system through blockchain technology that facilitates a peer-to-peer commerce transaction in the gig economy or any other commerce transaction, that is, that allows the passenger in this case and the driver to share that 25% between them. Yeah? And that's what the future is. That's what. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but I have a question, maybe others do too. What's to keep a blockchain startup from charging the same 25% that Uber would?
Correct. So that's where we are right now. So if you're looking at the blockchain startups that are working in this space and that are trying to find solutions, they're doing exactly that. They're using a centralized monopoly perspective to facilitate these services and to get paid in the system. Yeah, and that if you are a purist, you have a problem with that. I don't anymore. I used to have a problem with this 2 years ago. Right now, these are all intermediary steps. These are all necessary steps to getting to the future of a fully decentralized and networked society. Yeah. So the idea here is that people will stop thinking about property rights and ownership the way we currently think about this. We have to really, and maybe I'm being too utopian here for this audience, but the reason why we think of property rights and ownership the way we do is because we were all raised in centralized systems. In the future, property ownership is going to be less relevant. It's more about use rights, what people can do with property and how they share what we can do with property. Yeah, and that if you look at our millennials right now, they're already doing that. They're already living that. And in the future, fully decentralized society, decentralized network society, those things such as monopolization, ownership, and so forth will be able to change. And we will start thinking about this differently. And I'm actually planning on teaching a course just on what is decentralization? What does it mean to live in a decentralized society? And often when you try to familiarize yourself with blockchain technology, what you really need is an understanding of what decentralization means. Yeah? We have to literally retrain our thinking. The way we all were born into this world, we've always dealt with centralized systems. That's how society works. To understand what the future holds with this technology, we have to really understand what decentralization means. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm getting very abstract now. So let me become a little bit more real.
Wulf, we have two. We encourage questions. We have two of them right now. Do you want to take them?
Sure.
All right, great. First. So the question in a nutshell, Wulf, is if there is no central party, if there is no Uber, if there's no other, there's just a blockchain, how are these transactions facilitated?
Okay, so the idea here is to create a quote-unquote free user interface that allows the peers to connect. The idea is, right now, Uber facilitates the interface and the technology, but in the future, we will have an interface based on blockchain technology that allows transaction cost-free, completely disintermediated peer-to-peer transactions, where I simply, through the blockchain, I will have the ability to find somebody who matches my criteria and is willing to engage with me in commerce without the need of the intermediator. Right now, we don't have any of that. We're completely dependent on centralized structures and decentralized structures such as Uber that disintermediate initially, but are not fully disintermediated. In the future, through the UIs, the user interfaces, it's going to become a peer-to-peer society.
Good. That was question number one. Question number two. Oh. The question is about autonomous vehicles and the extent to which Uber is now going toward autonomous vehicles. Would that affect the blockchain?
Okay, so there are several startups that are right now working on blockchain-based solutions that are competing with Uber. We can poll the room and see what people think. There's some arguments that Uber will not be able to survive this because of their current business model. And yeah, so we can debate that at length if we want to, but the idea in the future is that, and what these startups are working on is to allow people to get free rides, completely free rides in autonomous vehicles that simply by controlling their own data. So the data that we're giving right now to Google and all the other centralized systems, centralized IT systems, without whom we couldn't survive in society right now, the way society is set up. The idea in the future is that you have rights to your own privacy data, and you surrender your data and your preferences in exchange for services. And so it's a really different way of thinking about this. One way that blockchain startups are already working on is if you give a free autonomous vehicle, the company that runs the autonomous vehicle, the rights to your preferences, meaning you're disclosing what your preferences are. That alone will enable you in the future to get a ride in an autonomous vehicle from point A to point B. Yeah. So it's this idea of the data about you and your preferences, that's worth something. And you can use this in the future as barter in a peer-to-peer society. Yeah.
The question number 3 is from Chris.
Centralization of wealth, exactly decentralization that you're talking about?
So the question is, in society, historically, isn't the centralization of wealth totally contrary to the blockchain? And I would say that maybe there's a communistic element to that question as well.
Yeah, I mean, blockchain allows us to redefine the concept of property rights through tokenization. By the way, to think of the doctrines, communism, socialism, capitalism, that's irrelevant. All of that stuff is irrelevant. Now, capitalism may arguably be the best tool for the decentralized society, but to think of it as a communist idea, that's centralized thinking, if I may say that. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
It looks like we have maybe 2 more questions. We'll take this one and then that one.
Going back to the Uber, to get to the peer-to-peer decentralized state, what is stopping my driver from being a murderer or a rapist?
So, the question is, if we go to this decentralized model, what's keeping from the Uber example, what's keeping the Uber person from being a murderer that will harm me?
Okay, so this is a great question. So if you listen to all the leading crypto startup conglomerates, they all are talking about decentralization, tokenization of commerce. Very few people talk about enforcement rights in society, meaning what is the role of government in a fully networked and fully decentralized network society? Meaning, who is making sure that the individual citizens' rights are protected? Yeah, that if somebody scratches my car in the street, that I have a way of claiming damages. If somebody hurts my individual freedom, hurts me as a person, how do I make sure that that person can be prosecuted? Yeah, these are huge questions. Yeah, huge questions in the decentralized future that have to be addressed, and it calls into question this idea of what is the role of government in a fully decentralized network society of the future. I have some opinions about this that are probably for this audience and for this setting a little bit premature, but let's suffice it to say we're working on solutions in this context. But we have to work on those solutions in the context of redefining the role of government in a decentralized future. And I want to leave it there because we're not there yet. This will take years. Yeah?
Looks like we have at least 2 more questions. Would you like to take them or keep going?
We actually want to talk about the role of law, right, in this decentralized future. So maybe we should move on a little bit.
Okay. I'll hold the questions maybe perhaps later. Thanks.
I mean, maybe one more, and then we'll move on.
We'll do one more. Go ahead.
The other aspect and transparency aspect of blockchain, is there a risk of loss of control of your personal, whether preference or other information, once you've put it out there to somebody for a service?
The question in blockchain, since there's a bartering aspect of it, to what extent should we be worried about our personal information being spread amongst the anonymous people or not?
Nice. Okay, so yeah, this is a huge issue in Europe right now, where we have this right to be forgotten by way of directive. Yeah. This is again centralized thinking. I don't want to dismiss it because that's what people care about, and those are things that people worry about. It's very hard to see in the future people being able to preserve their rights over their own information as we were used to it. Yeah? If we live in a fully transparent society, arguably crime that we are used to right now to solve with centralized system may not be as much of a problem anymore, arguably. Yeah? This is all way too theoretical. So let me move on to what we are currently doing, right? What we know we can do. Let me move on to that. Because what I'm telling you is that's one way to look at this, and I think we'll go that way, but it's very academic. I know I'm an academic, but for the purposes of this discussion, let's move to something that we know about. Yeah? So here's what we know right now. Blockchain financial services is happening. Financial services are fully, and I'll show you the data in a second, are being concretely every day being disrupted by blockchain startups. Yeah. So there's already data on, just to give you a concrete example, last year we had a survey of over 3,000 worldwide executives who are involved with settlement issues. There is consensus. 89% of those executives agree for settlement, meaning trade settlements. Yeah, currently we're T+2, which is sort of ridiculous if you think about it. In the past we were T+5 days, yeah, for settlements of trades. There is consensus that blockchain technology will be used to settle trades in the next 2 years. It's not even a question. This is being implemented right now. Yeah. So let's look at other solutions. So hard wallets, ATMs, compliance system, merchants, financial data, exchanges. If you look at the top left, these names, they are already household names for crypto. They have a problem with the SEC, no doubt about it. Yeah, the SEC will start regulating the exchanges. Top left. Yeah, so Coinbase, Gemini, anything that's in America. Yeah. However, we already see folks moving to Asia. Yeah. So the regulation that we're used to, and if we accept this notion of regulatory arbitrage, that's reality right now, today. It's happening across the board. And I want to say one other thing. For those of you who are trying to get a Coinbase account, to get into crypto, to start buying into crypto, you will experience that you simply cannot get in. Yeah, there is a backlog. Some people argue over 500,000 per month. Some argue per week, of people who are trying to get in who simply will not get accepted. One thing that I started finding out that I didn't know before is, for instance, that the backlog is actually intentional. The exchanges, and this is, don't quote me on this, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this on video, but if the exchanges allow people on, and these people don't know how to use the current infrastructure, the current technology, they're creating more problems for the exchanges in terms of customer complaints, customer calls that need to be financed, than simply letting more experienced people onto the exchanges. Yeah? So there is a training effect that has to happen, where people have to get used to dealing with private keys, with wallets, interacting with the technology as it exists right now, and it's completely suboptimal. Let me be very clear about this. What's currently in place, our grandparents cannot use that. Even our parents cannot use that. Yeah, and so we have a long way to go. There are some companies that are now, Edge, for instance, out of San Diego. They're now facilitating private key management systems. Yeah, so think of it as iTunes for crypto. That's already coming, but we're not operational yet. Yeah. So long story short, in financial services, it's a done deal. It's a done deal. Yeah, we're still implementing, but this is coming. This is, and I'll show you the data of another study in a second. In other industries, people are very seriously across the board now using the technology. So you'll see on the top left, financial services, trading, deal origination, equities, fixed income. In all of those categories, we have, I want to argue, hundreds of startups that are implementing new ideas, and many of them will be bought by the big players as a defensive move. Where the big players are feeling the heat, feeling the pressure that is coming out of these startups that are facilitating new answers, and they will start buying them. So then we have in media as a huge movement. Just this whole idea of royalties and the way we're handling royalties, and we're paying royalties to artists and to people who produce media content. That's changing radically. I'm currently advising one of those startups. And it's going to really change the way we're consuming data, consuming media, and the way we're interacting with media. The way we pay actors will change radically. The way the whole royalty system works will all change based on tokenization of media content. And so there's a lot of folks already working this side. And I could go on and on, but the big tickets probably for now are financial, supply chain is really big. Media, insurance, I mean, they're all coming. In terms of governments, let me just give you one data point. Recent study came out 3 months ago out of University of Cambridge. I know centralized system, but they did a survey, and they estimated in this service, they called up all central banks in the world. In their data, they're saying that over 41% of all central banks in the world are currently testing applications and use cases in the Ethereum blockchain. 43% of all. And out of those 40, we have over 40% that are trying to put prototypes on this year. So 2018, they're directly experimenting with this technology. That's a huge wake-up call for all of us. Because if the central banks are experimenting with it and trying to figure out how to use the technology, maybe that's a wake-up call for all of us who are involved in government and are thinking about the future as it is presented by this technology. Let me move on to this study quickly. So this is Credit Suisse and the OECD. They are looking at adoption scenarios for global gross value added migration to the blockchain. And I'm sorry if this is not extremely visible, but I wanted to present it to you nevertheless. So on the left, we are now looking at gross value added current prices. And we are listing the respective industries, starting with agriculture, mining, manufacturing, electric, water, construction, wholesale. And then if you move down to financial and insurance activities, yeah, then we look at the countries, so starting with the United States, European Union, Japan, United Kingdom, and so forth. And then on the very right, they're talking about, they're estimating how blockchainable those industries are. Meaning, and I use this word a lot now, blockchainable portion, meaning penetration rate. How likely is it going to be that that industry is going to be affected by the technology, meaning that it can be blockchainable? And then they're measuring low, medium, and high. And if you just look in the middle, financial services, on the high end, 100%. Yeah, this is the third from the top on the right. 100%. Yeah, so, and this is not Professor Kaal making stuff up. Yeah, so this is a fully data-driven study by the OECD. This is actual. Yeah, so they've looked at the penetration rates, and those are the predictions. Now, having said that, I think we have to move a little bit, Damien, right? Because we only have 15 minutes left.
That's right, 14.
Okay, 15 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, let me get moving then. Because I want to talk about smart contracting. So for us as lawyers, this is something to really think about, in my opinion. So let's compare a traditional contract with a smart contract, meaning contractual rights between parties are encapsulated in code. Yeah? There's no written document. There's no UCC that governs this. There's no contract case law that governs it. It's simply code. Code that specifies the rights and duties of parties to get to facilitate an automated payment. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. So in the past, we're traditional. Right now, we're talking about on average some time period. Yeah, that takes days. It takes days to agree to it. It takes days to negotiate it. There are transaction costs and so forth. In smart contracting, if you use it and you put the right data in this user interface, it takes minutes, sometimes seconds. It depends on the smart contract. Yeah? So if I want to send money to my father-in-law on the Ethereum exchange, it will probably take me under a minute right now. It's a copy-paste of addresses and inputting the amount of Ether that is transferred, and it goes in seconds. But I've done this a million times, so yeah, for me it'll go really quick. But let's just say it's minutes. So the comparison is really the time it takes. To make a long story short, it's a fraction of what we're currently doing. We're using manual remittance. In smart contracting, we have automatic remittance. We have escrow necessities. In smart contracting, there's simply no need for that, because you don't need that intermediator at escrow any longer, because you can automatically remit, and you have the security of the blockchain that allows you to know that you can trust the other third party. In that, unless the other third, the counterparty, unless the counterparty fulfills the requirements as input into the smart contract, there will be no payment. Yeah. So this whole idea of escrow, if you use the technology, it's just not needed. Yeah. So traditional contracts, because of the transaction costs and all the length of time it takes, very expensive in comparison. We have the wet signatures versus digital signatures, and then lastly, the slide says lawyers are necessary versus lawyers may no longer be necessary. I actually disagree with this. Yeah. In the way we've set this up right now, that's how it works. Yeah? Lawyers are simply not necessary, but we're dealing with a nascent industry. As we're building new systems based on this, the role of the lawyer is extremely important. Yeah? We as lawyers, we have to become knowledge engineers and facilitate the evolution of crypto based on smart contracting. Without lawyers, it won't work. And we see this already if we're talking to crypto startups. Now, the purists, they look at lawyers simply as intermediaries, but for us lawyers, they will not be able to build that society without our services. The problem is if we cannot help them and understand them the way they think about the future and the services that they're offering and the technology that they're offering, if we don't understand that, we cannot add value. Yeah. So for lawyers, it is absolutely crucial, in my opinion, that that we start appreciating what this technology does and what our clients need to interact with this technology. So let me just give you a quick example here.
A quick question. Isn't that true only for the intermediary steps of becoming decentralized? When it's truly decentralized, won't the business people just write their own contract?
No, no, they will not understand it. So here's the thing. Our legal system is very likely not adaptable and applicable to the crypto future. Yeah? And I want to talk about this in a second. Unless we make radical changes the way our centralized legal infrastructure works, we will have a huge problem integrating our existing regulatory mechanisms that have evolved over time in a centralized infrastructure and applying those to the decentralized evolution of the crypto economy. So the assumption here has to be that law, the way we interact with law, the way we think about law has to change. And it has to change as the legal rules that we currently have are changing given the decentralized future. Yeah? And I know it's very hard for us to wrap our heads around that because we always assume that if you cannot do it in the existing legal infrastructure, it simply won't work. Yeah, that's what we tell our clients. We tell them, well, the law says this, X, if you don't comply with X, it won't work. Well, the problem in the decentralized future is X simply won't matter anymore. Yeah, and that's very hard for us to wrap our heads around. It's already happening, Damien. I mean, if you look at ICOs, we're trying to sort of impose our views on what X is and how, because we've done it always like this. We told our clients it's X, assuming we knew what X was, and you need to comply with X. Well, X doesn't matter anymore. Yeah? And so that's something that's very hard for us as centralized trained lawyers to wrap our heads around. Yeah, but that's essential. If we don't wrap our heads around this, we cannot add value. Yeah, and I think that's really important to understand. So what do we have right now in smart contracting? Now, if you go all the way to the right, where it's the most complex, we have distributed autonomous society. That's what I alluded to earlier, yeah? Where this whole idea of government and the way society works in centralized systems is completely changed by smart contracting. And smart contracting is just one sort of umbrella term for what we're looking at. But I want to ask the audience, where do we think we are currently today? What is possible today? Is it somewhere in the middle, multi-party smart contracts, or is it further to the right? Where are we? How close are we to getting to a distributed autonomous society?
How many think we are in the middle? We have about 5%. How many think we're further to the right? And we have about double that. And how many think we're further to the left than the middle? Almost everyone.
Okay, well, let's see where we are right now. This is where we're at today, ladies and gentlemen. This is already happening. This is already real. Yeah, this is where we're at. We're somewhere between a distributed autonomous business unit and a distributed autonomous organization. Yeah, today, actually 2 years ago, when the first DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, was created. I don't want to go into it because we just don't have time for it, but it was the largest fundraising campaign of its days, 180 million in 1 month. Yeah, this DAO, this decentralized autonomous organization, did not have a registered office. It was not a business form such as an LLC. It was pure computer code. There was no registration. There was no government oversight. Zero. Yeah, I just want to get everybody in the room ready for this. That's where we were 2 years ago. This happened 2 years ago. Today, we're working on the next evolution. Yeah? And interestingly enough, when I came out of Davos, people are actually, the top players in the world, they're now talking about this. It's not just the Goldman Sachs that are trading Bitcoin. People are now getting ready for everything that's on the right of the arrow, the blue arrow. And we have to, it's still early, we're still not there. The arrow may stay there for a while, but that's today. Yeah, I want to be, okay. So now the quick question, what does this mean for regulation? And I want to get, for everybody in the room, I want to talk about this. So let's distinguish and compare an internet transaction that we're all used to, that we're all engaging in on a daily basis, versus a crypto transaction. Yeah? And so on the left, I listed knowledge of the counterparty, payment details, legal and remedies. So let's start about the internet. Yeah. Knowledge of the counterparty, absolutely. I know the IP address of the counterparty. I can find my counterparty. I know with whom I'm contracting. If not directly, I can find those people, and I have in personam jurisdiction over them in most cases. I know there's some, Damien, you know much more about this than I do, but in most cases we have that.
That's right.
And we know that in personam jurisdiction will apply. Yeah, we have in personam jurisdiction. We know we can sue them. Yeah, we know the credit card details. We can trace the credit card details. If we're not getting paid, we have recourse through the traditional legal infrastructure. Yeah, and traditional legal remedies. Now let's contrast this with the crypto transaction. And there, just to be clear for the audience, there are millions and millions of those transactions every day. Yeah. If you look at the market capitalization of the crypto startups that are trading right now, it is staggering. Last time I looked, 800 plus 800 plus 800 billion, yeah, at the time. Yeah, this is a while ago now. Okay, so let's look at the crypto comparison here. So knowledge of the counterparty, if they want to remain anonymous, there's no way right now that we can trace and figure out who these people are. Cryptology, you might call it, virtual private networks, make it impossible right now, today. There's some ways to get around it, but they take years and years and years to find the counterparty. So commercially, from a legal enforcement perspective, it is almost zero impossible. Yeah. Next one, we cannot trace the payment details. Now, MasterCard is working on some systems where they can trace all the way to crypto conversion, meaning fiat currency we're transferring into crypto. They can trace it with AI systems, but they can't trace it within crypto. That's not possible right now. They're working on attempting solutions. Again, all defensive moves, if I may point that out. And then thirdly, if that's true, and let's assume that those two statements are true, yeah? So we don't know who the counterparty is, and we can't trace the payments, then that means pseudo smart contracting and self-regulating, self-executing contracts, we simply don't have the remedies in the existing legal infrastructure that we've all grown accustomed to during the internet years and the way law works during the internet years. So we have to really wrap our heads around this idea that there's an incompatibility between crypto and the evolution of crypto and the way the law works today. Yeah. So interestingly, when I published the article on this very subject, the ABA published it in the ABA Business Lawyer. They said to me, no, we like your article, but we don't believe you that the existing legal solutions don't work. You need to prove that to us. Yeah. So I said, okay, I know it doesn't work, and I know there's nothing out there, but let me do the database searches. So I went in and did all federal and state Westlaw, Lexis, fast case. Let's ask the audience, how many hits were there for Bitcoin, smart contract, Ethereum, or crypto? So 4 key words. How many hits?
We'll say...
what do people think?
So guesses. Millions? Others? 1,000. Those are 2. Millions or 1,000?
Okay, so just to be clear, we have millions and millions of smart contracts already. Where there are bugs in code, things go wrong all the time, people are using millions of dollars worth of their money. As of 4 weeks ago, there were 7 cases decided in all federal, and not only decide, sorry, they're not decided, they're mentioning those 4 keywords in dicta and in footnotes. 7 cases with millions and millions, billions of crypto transactions where people lose money at millions of dollars of value. We have 7 cases that only mention in dicta and in footnotes those 4 keywords. So there's something fundamentally wrong with our legal system. That is what I take away from that. Because we all know that people have lost millions and were defrauded in crypto and couldn't recover. The legal system does not reflect that at all. So that means enforcement of rights that we're used to in crypto is a problem, period. And maybe we should leave it there because my clock says that we're at 3:15 now.
I think we are at 3:15. So that's with the demise of the legal system as a way to be able to regulate crypto. I think that's a good way to end. So let's join me in thanking Wulf.
Thank you, everybody.
Great, thanks, Wulf.
Thank you. We're good.
So we are good. I'm going to unplug you from the system. So you are now not audible by people. That was a fascinating talk, Wulf. That was really good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. You're going to be back in town soon. It'd be fun to have coffee.
Next week.
I'll